On the recording now, and
Okay.
there isn't a clear topic today except that it's all about Android. Android
Yep.
is in the wild. A lot of you have tried it, played with it, and now David's here to kind of give a state of the union on the Android project and to review what the next steps are, things that he's fixing, and possibly get into some discussion on how we can make our projects work for older devices. In fact, LA had an experience on that already too that we can talk about. So I'll turn it over to you, David. I'm recording.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think that what we'll find is there's a lot of these topics go in depth, and we probably won't want to jump around too much. But when we do have kind of a loose, casual hangout like this, that is what tends to happen. So, welcome everybody. It looks like we've got 17 or 18 people, which is good. That's a pretty good little group. Sue's got our microphones muted, or you guys' microphones muted because of the echo. And so if you've got a question or you've got something to say or whatever, you can use the chat window and throw it in there, and I'll try to monitor those, and maybe Sue, you can help me monitor those or whatever.
I will.
But the three things that I hope to talk about today, and ideally just kind of shed some light on some stuff for you, is kind of where we are with this Android rollout and some of the discoveries we've made, challenges, problems, whatever. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about something that I think is less understood than I think we'd like it to be, and that is this distinction between what the control panel and the self-hosted software or the BuzzTouch.com hosted control panel, what that does and what your Android project does. And I know that that might seem elementary for a lot of us who fully understand it. A lot of us, I don't think, do understand it. And I want to make sure that I talk about that at least a little bit and hit on kind of our perspective about that idea, because I think it's really, really important that people do have a concrete understanding of what the purpose of all these different parts, there's a lot of working parts. And so I think if we can get our heads around what we're trying to do, then it might help you get your head around, maybe when something doesn't go right, or maybe when something doesn't seem right, why it might be that way. And so we'll talk about that a little bit. And then the last thing I want to talk about, depending on how much time we have, is this Google Play Services package or project, depending on how depending on what you want to refer to that. But I think it's a really, really important concept because of what Google Play Services is. A lot of people don't even really know what it is. And I want to make sure that we talk about why it exists, what Google seems to be doing with it, and why it's so, so important to us as Android developers, kind of in a really good, powerful way. And so we'll talk about that. But let's start off with some of the issues. Some of the issues kind of as I see them and as a lot of the others see them. And I'm going to go to a now kind of famous forum post, which is only a couple of days old, but it's got 46 replies. I'm just going to scroll through it. And about a day after we released the download, the self-hosted control panel download is what I'm talking about, Worker 73 in Klagenfurt, I think that might be Germany, but I'm not sure. Might be, does anybody know where Klagenfurt is? I'm thinking it might be like a
Mario,
Sweden
help
thing
us
or
out
Norway.
here.
Huh?
In
Mario can help
Austria,
us out here.
I'm working 73. What?
Okay, there we go. And so the forum post title is Massive Problems with 2.1.9 and Android 3.0. And right away, and this is, by the way, if Worker 73 is in our meeting, fantastic. The things that I'm about to say are not meant to be, I'm not being critical of how his forum post was printed, but it helps me and all of us, I think, understand what I believe to be the perspective of a lot of our audience and a lot of our members. And this is where we start to get a little confused, I think, how we look at it and how some of you look at it. So I want to talk about this stuff. And so massive problems with 2.1.9 and Android 3.0 suggests to me right away that these two components, in this person's opinion, are directly related to each other and directly working together. And so if there's problems with 2.1.9, which is the self-hosted panel, then also this new project, Android 3.0, maybe also has problems. And he goes on and he lists about 14 different concerns and questions that are kind of all across the map. Some of them are related to plugins, some of them are related to the 3.0 core, some of them are related to the control panel. And it seems natural to ask them in these ways. And I think more than anything, he's just listing, or she's just listing, a big long list of individual questions, which is completely fine. But in reading through some of these questions, it occurred to me that maybe some of us think that, like the Android 3.0 package and the 2.1.9 package kind of have to be married and have to work together. And that kind of isn't necessarily the case. And so let me try to explain that a little bit and try to kind of unpack that a little bit. The idea is the Android project that we deliver to you through a control panel is kind of a standalone thing. And if you can imagine having a project without a control panel, and never even touching the control panel, if you had problems in that project, compiling problems, maybe certain features of it don't seem to work like they want to work, it's important that we understand that those problems are in the Android source code and not necessarily in the control panel. Right? They're in the Android source code. And so when we ask questions and we have these conversations about something being wrong with the Android code, let's try to keep that in our mind that it's separate from the control panel. Right? If there's a red error, if there's a compiler warning or something like that, a lot of times in the forum people will talk about going to the control panel and making changes. You shouldn't have a problem in the project to begin with, and if you do, then we need to look into that and make sure that your downloads come out clean. And so keeping this distinction is not necessarily easy. This separation, or the distinction between the two pieces, these two working parts, and it becomes more difficult when you have less of an understanding of kind of what's going on. So I think the easiest way to look at it is the control panel helps you organize this JSON data and organize this configuration file so that you don't have to do it yourself. It's, in essence, that's what it's doing. And then when you're done doing that, downloading your project, it's packaging up all these plugins for you and giving you an Android project. And so if that Android project doesn't work, there's a problem with Android. There's not a problem with the control panel. And so I know that's blurry, but I wanted to make sure I touched on that so that when you go down the path of trying to figure out where these problems lie in your projects, that you can maybe try to understand that distinction also. Because your Android project should work even without the control panel after you've packaged it. And so I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. And of course, there's all kinds of discussion that can be taken from that. And absolutely, you might be thinking, well, what if I want to use a data URL, or what if I want to download something from the internet? Yeah, that makes sense. There's now a connection as it loads that data. But that doesn't have anything to do with Eclipse or compiling or anything like that. So I wanted to throw that out. The next thing I want to talk about, we talked about we were going to kind of stick on 3 different topics, is this idea that the control panel itself, in fact, I didn't bring this up, but the control panel itself has a version right now, 2.1.9. And each time we release a new download, those of us who are super into this and love this and wait for it and install it right away and all of that, we kind of get beat up a little bit for a couple of days while these quirks are worked out. Right? It just happens. And so it seems logical that maybe with each new file that we update or we fix or we find a little bug, maybe we increment that version number or build number. So instead of 2.1.9, maybe you go to 2.2, then 2.2.1, then 2.2.2. And that does make some sense. But what we've done in the past, and that we did do this time, is we don't increment the version every time we manipulate like one file or find like one little error. And the reason for that is, what ends up happening is only a couple, 3 days go by, and we kind of do rapid updates real fast, and we iterate really fast while these reports come in. And what we don't want to do is come up with a new build or a new version like 3 times a day for 4 or 5 days. You'd be up to version 6 by Monday, right? And so instead what we've done is we've just kind of rolled out the package 2.1.9 after we do a ton of testing to it. The people who are super into it, you guys help us test it over the first few days. We kind of button it up again. And instead of incrementing the version, I think it's just better to leave the version the same, knowing that like the download right now might be a little bit different than the one you got 3 days ago. But because all of us are so involved in what all these little files do, I think it's just better that we leave the version the same, so that when we roll these out, it's just kind of a more consistent, every couple of months the version goes up, that kind of an approach. And so I realize that not everybody agrees with that approach. That's completely okay. But that is what we've done and what we're kind of sticking to now. Maybe we'll change it in the future, I don't know. I'd like to think that this went pretty good. When you roll out something in volume to lots and lots of people and you end up with even just a dozen little fixes that we can fix in a day or two, that's pretty good. That's pretty
But
good. So
the pros on this approach, though, is that the changes are made right away. Once you start putting version numbers in, then David would have to save up like the whole days or a whole week's worth of changes, and so that we can have a new version number. What's nice about this is that you see something wrong, it gets fixed right away.
Yeah, there's a lot of logic in that, Sue. That makes perfect sense. And so I think mostly what it is because our project is still pretty small and intimate amongst us, these 17, 18 people in this group right now. It's easier just, I mean, we're all friends and colleagues, and we all do this, and we enjoy it, and we don't mind necessarily kind of adding a file or taking a file away. I think that if we were a larger organization with dozens and dozens of developers, and I think we would probably have to be more structured in the way that we do this. But for today, it just kind of feels right to do it this way. You know, and I'm super open on the forum. I say, hey, this file changed, go grab it, you know, that kind of stuff. Ultimately, what I'd like to do, and we're actually moving in this direction, we're not too far away from it. You guys should be able to go to your control panel and see a version of every file, not just the package. And you should be able to grab one file that's been updated and FTP it to your install. We're still talking about 2.1.9. But you should be able to easily see, oh yeah, all of my files have the same date as the rest of these files, I'm good. But maybe we can introduce individual files to the package without a whole new download, which requires a whole new document and a whole new, you know, understanding. That's kind of where we're going. And along those lines, that is also the goal for your Android projects. When you go to your control panel right now, and let's say that you want the code for Susan's menu, if we update that plugin, the only way to build that into your project today is to grab the whole Android project, which isn't that big of a deal for those of us who understand it. But if you've made modifications to your project after you've downloaded it, it's kind of janky and kind of clunky to have to re-get the whole thing again for really what it might just be one or two simple changes, unpull all those files apart, figure out which ones you're going to replace, drag them around. It's kind of a hassle. So the idea would be on any of your screens, you should be able to download the code for that screen. And so we're working towards that also, so that if you want to replace one plugin or one, you know, the activity host file changes or something simple, we can do it that way. And so that's kind of what we're going. That's kind of where we're moving towards, is allowing you guys to do things a little bit more flexible. And that'll just make it easier on all of us, because when you're talking about file by file, it just becomes a different question. But let's roll through some of these other questions here and some of these comments. There was a few remarks on the image gallery, and I'm sorry, not the image gallery, but the images that are included in the BuzzTouch Core. A lot of you may or may not notice, but there's a whole icon set now included in that project. That's not something we did before. We had a limited set of icons in there, but not a very complete one. And the reason we've done that on the Android Core now, and we'll also do the same thing on iOS 7, is there's a few of these licensed icon packs, if you will, that will allow us to distribute them in your projects. We couldn't do that before. And so it'll be it's just easier on you knowing that your project's going to have, you know, 50 or 60 useful icons in it that you can use in terms of like toolbars and buttons and things like that. So that was a question. Another question that I've seen a lot of times is related to the version. The version in your manifest, minimum SDK version, for those of us who don't remember, that's the minimum build target on the devices that you're going to support. It comes with a minimum SDK version 11, which I say is plenty, right? There's not much difference in this. In fact, there's no difference in this project if you go from 11 all the way up to like 18 or something. But if you build with a minimum SDK version of 18, well, then it won't install on devices down to 3.0. And so I would recommend leaving it at 11. But I've seen some discussions about people changing this, and I'm not quite sure where that logic comes from, unless they do know why they're incrementing that up and targeting newer devices, and newer devices only. So you can also set a target SDK version here, but I'm not going to get into the whole long out discussion as to what that means. You can just Google minimum version versus target version. There's a significant difference, but we don't need to talk about that. So I don't see any questions in here. Let's move on to, and this is still related to kind of Android in the wild. Let's move on to some questions that I've been hearing in my email that are related to this Google Play Services idea and why this is so important. If you look in your project, and I'm going to open up this BuzzTouch project right here, and I'm going to open up the Android properties. Right here, Android. You can see down here on the bottom of my Android properties window, I do not have any external projects referenced. And what I mean by that is I've not told my compiler to look or reference a different project when compiling this project. And so in this configuration, in essence, this won't work. Because what you need to do, and I'm using the word need right now, although you don't have to, I'm not going to get into technically why, but what you want to do and what you need to do is reference the Google Play Services Library project in all of your Android projects. Just get in the habit of doing that. And I'll explain that in a little bit of detail after I show you how to do it. So before I can do that, I'm going to minimize my project library over here, but you see I have another project in my Eclipse environment. So I've imported this Google Play Services project. After I import it into my workspace, is what Eclipse calls it, then I can reference it in my BuzzTouch project. And so if I go to my Android settings, I can add a reference down here to the Google Play Services project. And when I do that, you'll see this green check mark, and it'll show you the path to that project. The reason that we do that is there's the two things that are important to understand here is the reason that we do it is we want to be able to take advantage of some of the things that Google Play Services allows us to do. Push notifications, maps, communication with the Google Play Store, right? A lot of this stuff won't necessarily work. And so I'm glad that we're showing these errors down here, and I want to clear this up just so we're all on the same page. So as soon as I reference this project, I got a bunch of errors. And this is the email I'm hearing. Why am I getting these errors as soon as I reference the Google Play Services project? If you open up your project, you will see here in the libs folder, see this Google Play Services remove file? If you read the instructions, we want you to remove this. That's why it's named remove. So when I remove this, and I clean this project now and I rebuild it, these errors will go away. So you might be saying, well, why do you include that if you just want us to remove it? Right? I mean, that's not a dumb question. That's a really good question. The reason that we ask you to, or the reason that we leave it in the download is because if we didn't, your project would have hundreds of errors in it because your compiler doesn't know what Google Play Services is yet until you reference it on your computer. And there's no way for us to know what the path to that Google Play Services project on your computer is. So you're the one who needs to bring it into Eclipse and then reference it and then remove the file that we've included. We've included that file so the compiler doesn't show everybody 200 errors and freak everyone out. So that's the idea. And so if you reference it and don't remove that remove project, there's some conflicts there. And so that's kind of the idea. And I know that sounds confusing, but the steps are create a reference to the Google Play Services project, get rid of the remove folder or file, and you're good. So that's kind of the idea there. I wish there were a way that we could distribute that Google Play Services library jar file to you with your download. Google won't allow us to do that, right? It's a licensing thing. They want you to go get the Google Play Services project. They want you to link to it in your project, not us. And so we can't really get around that. But I think it's good to know that kind of how that project works, or that how that process works. So now that I've said that, what we want to talk about now is, why is this Google Play Services thing so much more important than just Maps and just Push? Which seems like the logical, well, wait a minute, if I'm not going to do Push and I'm not going to do Maps, I just won't use it, right? I want to introduce an idea that most of us are very, very aware of in the Android development world as it relates to updating the Android operating system. Google cannot make a manufacturer, say Samsung, update their device. So let's say you have a Samsung phone, it's a Galaxy S2, and it's running Android 4.0.1 or something. And then Android 4.2 comes out. Your phone is not updated magically by Google. Google does not have a direct way to make Samsung give you an update through your carrier. Right? Because think about how updates work. It's a relationship between the carrier, the manufacturer of the phone, and Google. And so they're notoriously falling behind in this regard, right? There's all these devices out there that have all different kinds of versions. And Google really wants everybody to be on the latest version, but they can't control when that happens. And you contrast that to, say, iOS, right? We'll all get iOS 7 within a few days of each other, all of us, across the world. And you know, what a benefit for Apple to know that so much of a large percentage of their users do go through that update process. So Google has been struggling with this for a couple of years now. How are we going to issue updates to devices that we don't control? And so that is the underlying strategy and reason that the Google Play Services library exists. Google's moving lots of their updates to that library and out of the Android operating system. And the reason that they're doing that is they can issue that through the Play Store on your phone, because we all have the Play Store app. So I hate to use the word kind of backdoor, but it's kind of a backdoor way for Google to roll out updates to Android without having to go through the manufacturer and without having to go through the carrier. So they're literally taking things out of Android and adding them to Google Play Services. And a classic example is, let's go back to Maps. When you download Android operating system, the open source operating system, and you're going to build a phone, and you're going to put Android, and you're going to run it from, your HTC, and you're going to build the Hero phone, you don't get Google Maps. You don't get lots of Google services. They're Google services. And so they're removing features from the Android operating system and adding them to the Google Play Services library so that they can control more of the experience overall. And so we developers, we benefit from that if we understand it. But if we don't understand what it means and we don't know why we add this library to our project, then we're at a little bit of a disadvantage. And so I want you to look at the Google Play Services library as an awesome thing that's a little bit of a pain in the butt. Right? It's a little bit of a pain in the butt because, as we know, in order to use the features in the library, we have to do things like get an API key for Google Maps. We have to get a Google API project number for push notification. We have to do these things, which is a little bit lame for those of us who are kind of open source minded and we don't like all these connections to Google, right? It's a little bit hard to get our head around. But ultimately, without Google and without their distribution network, we're kind of nowhere anyway, right? And so and it's no different than Apple. I mean, Apple makes you go through all kinds of, you got to sign contracts and mail them things and give them thumbprints, and I mean, Apple's notorious for that. And so try to move past the privacy and the they got their finger on me and kind of the man opinion, which I carry strongly, right? I love open source. I don't like this idea that my my API key and my name are connected to everything. Right? I don't like that idea, but it is the world that we live in. And so Google Play Services is a great thing. It's a little bit hard to understand, but once you start adding it to all your compiled projects, you'll be super happy that you did, because as Google rolls out features to phones, your app will get them, right? And your users won't have to ask themselves, I wonder why this app didn't update. And it's funky because all of a sudden KitKat comes out. And if you look at the features of KitKat, this is fascinating. And this might be the first time in the history of kind of mobile operating systems in the last 5 or 6 years, the first time where it's actually less. The new Android operating system that comes out in the future, here in a few weeks or months or whatever, when KitKat comes out, will be a lighter footprint and less code than the previous version. Because they're taking it away from the manufacturers. And they're giving it to Google Play Services library, which is for developers, which is awesome. Because remember, a manufacturer can't ship Google Play Services on the phone unless they have Android or Google's approval. It's the Google Play app. If the phone has the Google Play app, they've made the agreement with Google. Well, no Android manufacturer today so far has courage enough to say, you know what, we're going to go Android, but no Google Play app. There's a couple of them in the Far East. The Baidu companies made a few Android devices that don't have Google Play in them, and there's a little bit of a conflict. But that's the philosophical kind of high-level view of why Google Play Services is important, and things that they don't necessarily tell you. That it's no secret for those of us like me that obsess over the stuff and study and read and keep up and try to stay on top of all these kinds. I'm fascinated by it, right? I love these ideas. As we watch this market evolve and kind of change, and you know where the wins are and where the losses are and where the gains are, and you know where these companies, you know, so far keep helping the devices get better and the developers, you know, have more opportunity and all that kind of stuff. But it's fascinating. I do look forward to a day. That when you compile your Android app with Google Play Services library, as long as all the phones that you put it on have the Google Play app, you're good. That's what they're shooting for, and that's what I hope for. As long as they have the Google Play app. If you try to put your Android app on a phone that doesn't have Google Play, which is how you browse the Play Store, it's going to be tough to make good stuff. It's going to be tough to make good software because we just assume that it has that. And it's an easy assumption to make because when Apple started this crazy revolution, they put the App Store on the phone. So we assume that Android has the Google Play Store, but they don't all, right? There are phones that don't have it in far stretches of the world where you're getting downloads, but they don't even know what Google Play is. So it's very fascinating. And they've side-loaded it. You know, they found your app through the market. So they're browsing it, they're downloading it, and they're installing it on their phone somehow, kind of without the blessing of the mothership, which is Google. It's very strange, very strange. And so I wanted to make sure that we threw that out there kind of in the first half an hour of our conversation, because it's so important as an Android developer that you understand what it is. And I do realize a lot of us don't even understand how Eclipse is making these projects and what the relationship between this project and this project and this project is, and the package names. And I mean, it's not easy to understand. I totally get that. I totally get that. And so we're doing the best we can to deliver you a project that you can compile and run and smile and be happy to have. But there still is this understanding of what your compiler's doing that, at least for now, you know, I think it's good to have. I think it's good to have, and it's exactly this understanding that makes you guys valuable and professional to your customers and your clients. I mean, your end users expect you to know how this works. If you're developing for paying clients, you know, professionally, your customers and your colleagues, and they expect you to know how this works. You can't abstract it all. If you take it all away, and we just give you an APK download, I mean, think of it this way. And this is very, very doable. And I hear this all the time too. Why don't we just compile this for you? Be relatively easy, right? Set up a Linux backend, put the Android open source SDK tools on it, compile it, and send you a download. We could do that. It wouldn't be that hard. You could even sign it, upload your certificate file, whatever. The problem is, and I consider it a problem, David personally, BuzzTouch, I don't think that benefits you. I don't think that helps you in the way that I think we're helping you now, even though it might be frustrating. Because if you're going to do this for any length of time, and the length of time might be 5 or 6 months, you're going to go through an update in that time, the more you understand, the better off you are. So it's a balance between us doing it, you doing it, and you actually being a professional at this. It's kind of the idea. And so we're doing the best we can to help you and all that, but let's open up to questions. I don't really see any. I see Chris saying, does the NSA track your API key usage? Yeah, probably. You know, the whole PRISM thing. Back to that API key stuff, I just really, really struggle with the idea that so few companies control such a large part of our computing experience now. And an argument can be made that's kind of always been that way, but I would say, no, it hasn't. I mean, it's always been that only a few companies made the hardware, and only a few companies made the operating system, but there were thousands of companies involved, and you could buy a computer, bring it home, not be connected to the mothership, and use that thing wonderfully. You could get on the internet, share information, disconnect from the internet, right? Today, everything is hyper-connected, and it's awesome on one hand because it brings us such power, but on the other hand, it just is alarming to me. And I don't mean to go down a whole, crazy, source code stuff or crazy philosophical path, but, I do want you guys to kind of know how I look at it. So Joe's got a great question. Is the new control panel been converted to the JavaScript concept versus the PHP pages? I have not looked. Fantastic question. Fantastic question. And the answer is yes, but most people don't know how to take advantage of that yet. And so let me back up and rephrase what Joe's asking because a lot of us don't quite understand. If you look at a plugin package today, I think I got one here. Yeah, we'll look at Chris's, let's look at, I don't know, user settings, Chris's user settings package. So Chris has got, in this user settings plugin, a PHP file, index.php, which loads when you go to your control panel. Let me log in here to a control panel. See if you guys are keylogging me. This is just a test bed anyway. Every time you are working with an app and every time you are working with a screen, for example, the PDF screen, you'll notice here that for those PHP developers and web developers, you'll know what I'm talking about, but you'll notice here that I'm in a directory called Files, Plugins, and I'm actually at BT screen PDF doc / index.php. We've talked about this before. The index is not there because it's the default web page for this directory. So we don't need to put it there and we get the same thing. So what Joe's asking is can we use now index.html? And we're going to get a page missing here because that's not in this plugin. So the answer technically is no, you can't because you don't know how. But yeah, you can if you do know how. So the reality of it is we're slowly moving people away from using PHP in their plugin packages so that we can automate the plugin market. If there is not a PHP file in a plugin package, then we can allow any of you guys to upload your plugin creation to the marketplace without having to worry about it damaging our back end. And so we're going to be moving everybody towards a plain Jane HTML page with JavaScript and print, and publish a list of API calls you can make. And I'm getting a little off track for Android today, but the point is, Joe, look in your file now and you'll see in your project, I'm going to view the page source for this, you'll see a reference to a script right here. Let me find it. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? You will find it. Here it is. You'll find a reference to a script right here BT save screen data ajax.php. That did not exist before. Didn't exist. That's in your project. That is not in the plugin. And yet we're on the plugin page, right? This is the page for the plugin. But the script that it's calling to save the results is part of the core now, part of the self-hosted control panel package, and not part of the plugin. So it's this slow kind of process to where if you knew what this script did, you could wire up your click handler like this and save these results without necessarily knowing how that worked, right? And so we're moving you towards that kind of in baby steps so that developers can kind of start experimenting a little bit. But great question, great question. And again, we're jumping around between PHP, control panel, Android Core, all these different concepts. It's like we're up to 20 today, Sue. I think that might be a new record.
Yeah, I think that might be a record. Cool.
20, we might have 24
you know,
last
for people
week.
here.
So back to Android. Hopefully that made some sense what this library was and why we should all love this thing. We should all love this thing. And the reason that we should love is it allows Google to update our end user phones in ways that the manufacturers and the carriers have not done. That's the bottom line. And they took matters into their own hands about a year ago, and they've slowly rolled this thing out, and they've not said much about what it does. The interesting thing is this is another kind of secret that most people don't realize. If you open up your Android phone, your Android tablet or whatever, your modern Android tablet, why is the Google Play Services app always running? It's always running. You kill that thing and you launch any other app and it just launches again in the background. Why is it doing that? And you can think bad thoughts like the man and the NSA and the spying and all that kind of stuff, but I like to think good thoughts. It's communicating directly with Google as needed to make sure that I have on my phone the resources that I need to run these modern apps. And so it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool. Now, you and I would have a hard time building an app that was running in the background permanently because our users wouldn't stand for it, right? We as developers haven't earned the credibility to tell the world, hey, run my app and just don't worry about it. Let it run all the time, right? They'd freak out. Our customers wouldn't allow us to do that. And the reason that they wouldn't allow us to do that is not because they don't trust us. That's a little bit of it. But because our app would suck their battery down. It would crush their phone if it ran constantly and did all kinds of reporting and cloud downloading and all that kind of stuff, because we don't have the same access to the operating system that Google does. So the Google Play Services app is working with the Android operating system in a way that we can't, and it's doing that extraordinarily efficiently. And because of that, it can just kind of sit back there and run and wait and listen for pushes and listen for all kinds of updates and listen for news from Google that we as developers are happy that they're doing. That's completely awesome. So that's what iOS is doing. It's the exact same thing. Some people think that, you know, the iOS 7 alert badge that you see on your phone next week that says, you know, new version of iOS available, some people think that's a push notification. And Apple pushes to your phone. It's not. It's polling. And your phone is calling home more than you may like, but it's doing it. And, you know, there's a direct relationship between the people who think they own your phone, Apple, and their back-end systems. And so it's fascinating. So Ingo, excuse me, Ingo, if I didn't pronounce your name, but I love that name. That is cool. I'll give it a go. Ingo Webernig. That's awesome. I've got a question, and I'll read it out loud. I downloaded the source code for my app and got Stringo activated. I have to type in the strings by myself. They're not automatically in the source code. The SDK option is there and activated, but it doesn't work. Or if it's not just working for me. Oh, and you're Worker73. Fantastic. Nice to meet you. So great question. I'm going to revisit that question. It's so good because this is an important concept. Okay, so if I'm in my control panel and I go to download my project or package up my project and prepare it for download, you might notice now that in your self-hosted control panel, you have this long list of partners that we think the world of that you didn't have in your self-hosted panels before. Those were only on BuzzTouch.com. And so that's the first thing that I want to say. The next thing is Ingo's asking a fantastic question. Wait a minute here. Let me get this straight. I say I want add Equity or Freshdesk or PingJam in my app. I check the little box. I hit the download, and nothing happens. Right? Wait a minute. What the heck? How is that anything different than me going to Freshdesk, downloading the SDK, reading the instructions, dragging all the files around, and bringing it in myself? Right? That's a completely good question. And so fundamentally, there is no difference. Right now, that is literally all we're doing for you, is we're showing you partners that we respect and trust. We're showing you an instruction document on how to use this with the BuzzTouch app. We're including that in your download, but we're not doing that coding for you. And here's why. Because it would be awesome if we did, right? How cool would it be if all of that stuff was magically built into your app the minute that you downloaded it? And so there's two sides to this. I think we all agree that it would be awesome and epic and cool if this stuff just magically worked. I think we also all understand that that's an extraordinarily complex idea, right? The idea that each of these companies with their SDKs would magically just be in my BuzzTouch download is absolutely in our future. Absolutely. But doing it right now in the beginning, because we've only been showing these partners for a few months now, doing it right now in the beginning is nearly impossible. And it's impossible for reasons that are not technical. Not technical. And I'll give you another example, or I'll give you some examples of that. A lot of these SDKs, and I won't name names, I don't expect them to last. Sorry. I don't expect all of these partners to last long-term in our control panel. And here's why. Our users, for example, might ask for help from those companies, and they go missing, right? They don't seem to understand what it takes to support developers. And so that doesn't mean that we don't respect them, but we're trying to figure out what are the best partners to actually have. So we're trying to help partners get exposure to our audience. A lot of people think that they pay us. They're not paying us. We're doing this because we think it's good for our audience and them and us. And ultimately what will happen is I think that we'll land on partners that are a little bit more serious about what it means to have a strong relationship with BuzzTouch. And what that will mean is we're going to have to get your code comfortable and happy working in the BuzzTouch project, because we're going to do exactly what Ingo says. We're going to get it integrated on the download, period. So think of things like control panels. Think of things like the dynamicness of these services. Most of them require you to register over there and log in over there to manage your Scringo or to manage your Freshdesk or to manage your whatever. Those companies, ideally you wouldn't be jumping around to 9 places. So what does the API look like to allow all of that to magically work while keeping the stakeholders in mind? I mean, there's 3 stakeholders now. There's the app developers, there's the SDK publisher, and there's us. We have to balance all of that stuff, and the easiest way right now is to expose them to you, show you how to use it, keep and pay attention, which is what we're doing, so that we can then decide how do we rewrite our partner document that says, look, if you want to be in the BuzzTouch world, these are the requirements. This is what our members expect. We're an army of members that work in a certain work pattern, all of us. And we think that these companies kind of owe us a little bit more. Another example, what are you going to give our BuzzTouch members that you don't already give your normal audience? Right? We think that these companies should give you, a BuzzTouch member, something more than they give everyone else. And it takes a little bit of time to prove that that's valuable. And so that's what we're working through, is we're trying to say, look, SDK publisher, we're happy to send you developers that are our friends and colleagues that we have a tremendous amount of respect for, but don't take that lightly, right? Don't take advantage of them. Don't ignore them. Don't just say, great, we got new developers, without earning it a little bit. And so earning that a little bit is, what are you going to give them? How are you going to help them? Are you going to come to our meetups? Are you going to be in our forum? Are you going to help these people who are trying to make high quality apps using your SDK? So it's a balance, and that was a long 10-minute answer for what is a 30-second question. I hope it helps clarify kind of the idea, but you're not broken, Ingo. There's nothing broken. You're getting your package. You're getting your PDF. I think that we have lots of ways to improve just the PDFs already. You know, Tony on our end has been working with these partners to get them to understand that adding a generic PDF to a download is different than saying, this is how you use this in your BuzzTouch project. And demonstrate to the developer that you know how their project's put together. Right? You understand it in a more deep down way than just a generic Android project that doesn't have any files in it. Because all of ours are complete. You know, all of ours are already packaged up, and we think that we can improve that PDF to make it easy, you know, to make it easier. And we're helping these companies do that. A couple of them are really impressive, and it shows that they've taken the time to really kind of embrace what we're all trying to do, you and us. And some of them, frankly, they just don't seem to understand. So we'll give it some time. We'll give it some time and see how that goes. I think that the most important part is the benefits.
David, is there any way to get those PDFs without downloading a package?
Technically, sure. Technically, but that kind of defeats the purpose.
Because what if I have an app that I add a lot of images to? I don't really want to download a new project. I just want to know how I can put RevMob into it now.
Yeah, just go to revmob.com.
Oh, okay.
And that's my point. We're trying to just show a difference between just going to revmob.com and digging and learning and figuring out versus what we give you.
Right.
Right? I think ultimately what we'll do, remember when we said we're going to allow you to download individual files for your project if you so choose? We'll also allow that individual download for the PDF. Okay. Today we're not, because we're keeping track of a lot of statistics, speaking of the man, to try to figure out which of these partners are succeeding. We're trying to see what are people interested in, right? What are people interested in? And so that's a fantastic question. I don't see any other questions, and there were about 5 minutes before 2.
See, I think we turn off the recording to keep the video a little shorter. I've had better luck with video since I started keeping them a little shorter. So maybe wrap up for the video here, and then we can keep talking. So
yeah, we can totally keep talking all we want, but why don't you do that? Why don't you wrap us up on that note, and then kind of summarize what we talked about, and then we'll just zip the recording up, and then we'll keep talking.
Oh, summarize. Wow. Well,
you want me to summarize?
Yeah, I think you should summarize since you were talking.
Perfect. So we talked about the distinction in this 55-minute conversation. We talked about the distinction between, from our perspective, the Android core and the control panel, and how those things can work together, but they don't have to work together. And so when there's problems in your project in Android, then it's an Android problem. And when there's problems in your control panel, it's a control panel problem. And the blend of those is kind of a separate kind of a question. Where we talked about that. We talked about the significance of Google Play services and why it was so important to embrace it and include it in your projects, even if you're not sure you're going to use it, even if you don't think you're going to use it. We talked about that. We talked about these partners and why we think they're awesome and why we love them, and we're trying to help them, and they're helping us, that's for sure. And we're trying to kind of ease our way into how can we include these SDKs auto-magically in our downloads. I didn't get into all the details there, but one of the technical challenges is most of them require a link to a library project that you've got to drag into Eclipse, so it's kind of weird. But anyway, so how do we include that? And then the other kind of the last thing that we talked about early on, just kind of dancing around a little bit, is this idea about the downloaded self-hosted package and how our philosophy around the versioning. You know, 5, 6 days, 3, 4, 5 days of the same version kind of changing real quick. In this case, 2.1.9. And we talked about why we don't upgrade that. You know, why don't we update that version number every single time?
Oh, good memory.
Yeah, so we should probably all, in fact, I'm going to give a little plug here. Ingo, in case you guys aren't watching the chat room, Ingo did a fantastic thing, and he's dude's awesome. I don't know how long he's been in our community. I don't remember the date there, but he put together a really, really cool Android 3.0 plugin app that allows anybody to play with a lot of the plugins. In fact, all of them, I think. And he's, you know, that's a lot of time. That's a lot of time. And so in the forum, I don't have the forum post in front of me, but I can probably find it. Maybe if somebody else does, it's titled, you know, Massive Issues or whatever. Post it in the link here. It's a download to the app, and you can put it on your Nexus, or you can put it on your Android gadget. You can play with all this stuff. So awesome job.
Yeah, Ingalls, you can throw it into our chat window. That'd be great. We'd like to see it.
Yeah, totally. And
Thank you, David. I'll turn off the recording then, and we can keep going.